Hello again, you're watching Everard Junction, and today I'm just going to be showing you what I've been doing over the past couple of weeks. And we've had some very nice weather, it's been very hot and stuffy up here, so any scenery work on the layout has been extremely difficult to do due to the heat. So I've been busying myself downstairs, and I've been working on a project with these two Class 56s that you see in front of you. So let's go back a couple of weeks and I'll show you what I've been up to. This is one of the oldest locomotives in the fleet. This was the first one I ever bought for the layout. This is 56049, it's one of my favourites, and all I'm going to do to it is tidy up the weathering a little bit because I think it's a little bit too heavy, and I'm going to repaint the red stripe along the bottom because the shade Hornby used is somewhat darker than the prototype. And this is the last project I'm going to be working on. This is another Hornby Class 56, exactly the same tooling as that one is. I bought this probably 2 or 3 months ago, maybe 4 months ago now. I've had it for a little while, but you haven't seen much of it because I haven't got around to starting the project for it yet. I only bought this for one reason, and that was because it was so outrageously cheap. I think I only paid about £60 for it. Right now, a brand new Class 56 in Hornby's current release timetable would cost you over £100, and already pre-owned examples of this particular locomotive on Hattons are already at £100. If we have a look up here, there's exactly the locomotive we've just looked at, and you can see it's £99.50, and that one is second hand. I bought this brand new only 3 months ago, so I'm well happy to get that for only 60 quid. Now, it may have been cheap, but unfortunately it is not quite right for the layouts. There are a couple of issues. This particular locomotive, 56040, was in this colour during the period the layout is set in, and it did operate in the region the layout is set in. However, there are a couple of differences because this Hornby model actually depicts the locomotive in its preservation scheme. The first and most notable thing is these modified grills here. This was done by Loadhaul when they owned 56s in the mid-1990s. Loadhaul, Transrail and some of the other operators from that time modified those vents and some of the innards in an effort to improve the reliability of the Class 56. No idea how successful it was. All I do know is that these grills are not correct for the layout. So what I'll be doing is changing these roof grills. I'm going to attempt to remanufacture the original grills out of plastic card and pop those in. We'll see how successful that is. The front end is fine for a 56 in the 80s. This is the Romanian type cab, the earlier type cab, which has the recessed headlights, the small oval light and the small horn grille. So I can repaint this into any Class 56 up to 56055, I think. After that they had a slightly different cab. So I've got plenty of options available. I've got 2 liveries in mind for this locomotive. The first one being the British Rail large logo livery, which had the full yellow ends, the blue in the centre, and the large double arrows and a large locomotive running number. I'm going to try and find an example that has the correct cab in roughly the right area of the country in that colour during the right year. If I can't find any pictures of that, because basically most of the Class 56s were repainted into some sort of freight livery quite early on, so not many survived in the large logo livery, particularly in the south of England. But I'll see if I can find one anyway. Removed all of the glazing in the interior, extra detail, so you can see all the front detail I've taken off, and I've also taken out the interiors. That was very difficult. That's probably one of the hardest dismantle jobs that I've had to do on a locomotive. The interiors are very, very delicate. You have to be very careful. If I get one of them out, you'll see why. There's the cab interior. You can see it's very delicate. It's extremely well done. You've got all the gauges, all the levers. You've even got the little stove there for boiling the kettle. Both in bits now. I've taken as much off as I can. However, these white handrails around the front and the cab sides I'm going to leave because they are made of plastic and they appear to be glued in every single hole that they go into. so I don't want to risk damaging or breaking any of those, so I'm just going to leave those on, and I'll have to hand paint them after I've done any resprays. I use ordinary T-cut for removing any paint that I have applied to locomotives, and I also use it for removing decals and numbers. The actual paint finish locomotives are done in is reasonably hard wearing, and if you're careful with T-cut, you can usually get rid of any decals or any weathering that you've done yourself without damaging the paint underneath. You can see already this area here is a lot cleaner than this side. I'm not actually going to be repainting this locomotive. I'm just going to redo the red stripe along the bottom because the shade Hornby have used is too dark. But I just wanted to clean up the weathering. This locomotive has been weathered probably 3 or 4 times. It's basically the loco I used to practice my weathering skills on, as it was the first one that I bought, so it would have been the first one that I started weathering. So I'm just going to clean it up and make it look a little bit more realistic. Some of them did get this filthy, but I personally don't like them this grimy. I like the prettiness of the livery with a sort of average level of grime. So there you go, I've been over the whole model. There's a few areas I still need to touch on, but I'm just going to let it dry now, and I'll come back to it later. I'll be weathering the roof again anyway, so I'm not too worried about any few bits left on the roof, particularly around the exhausts, because you get loads of filth there, and these fans as well get pretty dirty, so I'm not too worried about that. The main thing was the body sides, and as you can see, this one here, this is completely fresh out of the box. This one was very heavily weathered. It's now been brought back to pretty much the same finish as this one here. Okay, so working my way through modifying the vents on this 56. Still not entirely sure how it's going to turn out, but no turning back now. I was hoping that these grills were just clipped in, but it turns out that this particular body is made using a different mould, different tooling. So these are actually part of the body shell. So what I've done is I've actually removed them entirely, cut them out, and I'll be tidying up the edges, getting rid of any evidence of the black grills, and then I'm going to fabricate some grills that are basically the same as this to go back in its place. And that'll basically backdate the locomotive into the 1980s. The plastic's quite soft, so I'm just drilling as many holes as I can, and then I'm cutting along the gaps with a scalpel, and then the piece falls out, and then I just use a very, very small file to neaten up the edges. So there we go, I've done both sides. 2 big holes in there now. Now I've got loads of plastic card, so I'm going to experiment with trying to make this effect just on a sort of like spare piece to one side. Once I've worked out a nice way to replicate this detail, I'll make a smaller version and try and glue it into the grills. Okay, so it's going quite well so far. I've put some plastic card on the inside, on the back, and then I'm just building up the shape with additional pieces of plastic card. I've already done the other side. I'm just giving it a quick coat of paint. It's not quite the right colour, but just to get an idea of what it'll look like. I don't think that's too bad. A bit of weathering, and you'll not be able to tell that those vents at the end have been scratch built compared to the others. I think that should look good enough anyway. It's the first time I've done anything like that, so I'm relatively happy with the outcome, and it should look okay on the layout. And more importantly, I have successfully backdated the locomotive, so it's now correct for the era that the layout is set in. Just finished repainting the red stripe on 56049 to the correct shade of rail freight red. So I'll peel off the masking tape and see how that looks. There we go. It's amazing actually what a difference that has made to the model. Being the correct shade, it looks a lot better. I just need to paint the tread by the door silver again, but that's an easy job with a small paintbrush. Okay, so I've done a bit of work since you last saw it. 56049 has Had the red stripe changed, as you saw in the last bit of the video, and I have started the process of weathering it. It's not finished yet. Most of the airbrushing is done. There's a bit of dry brushing that I'd like to do, and a little bit of weather powder work in a couple of areas perhaps. Real pictures of this locomotive in service showed a number of streaks down the side from these radiator sort of grills, or these roof vents rather. So I might have a go at replicating some of those, but on the whole I think this looks a lot better than the previous efforts. As I said previously, this locomotive was probably weathered maybe 3-4 times, and each job was done over the top of the other, and I ended up with something that was so dirty, just didn't look right. But I think this is looking a lot closer to what I've seen in pictures. Moving on, this was 56040, but it soon won't be. Currently about, I don't know, a third of the way for a respray of this particular machine. I'm going to be changing the colour to what I said previously. I've decided to go for BR large logo livery. I don't have too many locos that are in that livery. In fact, I think off the top of my head I've only got one, so it'd be nice to have some other locomotives in that particular colour scheme. So this will become 56047. It's taken me ages to actually find out which running number to paint this particular locomotive into, because of the detail variations that you get on Class 56s. Now this particular mould, this body shell, this represents a locomotive from the earlier batch, so a Romanian built locomotive. You can tell because it has some detail variations to the cab. We can see down the bottom here there's a lip. Now later locomotives didn't have that. That was a feature unique to the earlier style of cab. If we also come right round to the front, you can see where the horn grill is in the centre. It's quite small. That's the earlier style of the horn grill. There's a number of other subtle differences as well, such as the headlights being recessed. Later locomotives, the headlights protruded. And also something else to take into account is whether or not the locomotive that you're trying to do has the large square centre headlight or the smaller circular one like you see here. Just goes to show the importance of doing some research. It took ages, but now I can go ahead and repaint, and I know in my mind that I'm doing it correctly. I'm sure there's probably one very subtle difference that I've probably missed out, but you know what? I've done so much research into this that if I've missed something, it's probably so minor that, to be honest, I'm not really going to care about it. Done the yellow ends and the roof. The roof is supposed to be this colour, although many photos will lead you to believe that it probably isn't. Large logo livery, you had like an off-white roof. The white, incidentally, was the same shade used here. So this colour here, this sort of whitey grey colour, I think it's called rail grey or something, is the same colour that was used on the roof for this colour scheme. Now there's going to be loads of weathering on the roof, as with the other 56. So this will darken down a lot, and eventually this original colour won't be particularly visible, much like it is in most photographs. Next thing to do is to paint the blue. I've got a nice pot of rail blue I've had sitting around for ages, so I'm going to be painting this section along the side in the rail blue livery, and the whole lot needs a coat of gloss varnish as usual, and then I can get going with the transfers. So it's been about a day or two, and I've painted on the rail blue onto the sides. It's come out very nicely. I've used Phoenix Precision paint as usual, and then before I did a coat of gloss varnish I mixed up any of the three colours you see here, mixed up a couple of those in small quantities, and then with a very small brush I just went round and touched up any areas where the paint had bled onto areas where we didn't want it. So for example, the blue connects to the roof. There was inevitably around those grills and places a few bits that bled through, so I just touched those up with an identical colour on a small brush, and then gave the whole thing a coat of gloss varnish, which sort of beds everything in, gives everything a nice gloss to it, and then did the transfers. Transfers were okay, there aren't too many, however this was very fiddly. That's a real nightmare to get perfectly level and in the right place. And as you can see down the bottom, you've got this small bit of detail which you've got to get the transfer to go over perfectly. That took a long time. You can see these areas are present along the bottom of the Loco at this end. And it was useful on pictures because I could use that piece of detail as a gauge as to where the double arrow needed to be placed. Unfortunately, after that, it just means that it's quite difficult getting the transfer to sit in place nicely. To get around issues like that, I use Revel Decal Soft. It's just a decal softener. There's loads of different people that make decal softener. It all basically does the same job. It doesn't really matter who you get it from. You put it over the top of the area that you want to bed in, and then you just leave it, and the transfer will gradually settle down and mould itself around the piece of detail that it's sitting over. You can use a small brush to agitate it and move it around as well. I painted the black around the cabs as well. I just did it by hand. Came out quite well. A couple of little bits I'd like to touch up before I go any further though. Also painted the handrails white as per the prototype, and put a bit of black around the headlight surround, which 56047 certainly had when it was in service in this livery. But again, just did it all by hand. Just starting to get the chassis ready. As you can see, I've painted the wheels and I've taken the side frames off of the bogies, and I'm painting those up in sleeper grime. I'll add a little bit of extra oil and black dirt around the springs. At the moment those side frames are still drying. Something that's really nice about Hornby locomotives, and also Helgen, is that the side frames of the bogies just pop off. You don't have to take any clips off or unscrew anything. You just pull the sides of the bogies and they come off, which makes them really easy to paint and saves you having to mask up and dismantle the entire chassis. I've painted the buffer beam semi-gloss black. This is in keeping with the prototype. This model was originally in that livery, so it would have had red buffer beams, or it had red buffer beams, so I had to paint those. I just used a bit of Revel semi-gloss black, and then that will be weathered up once I get the side frames back on and do the fuel tank there. I haven't done the fuel tank yet. That still needs to be done. I finished the weathering on 049. Quite pleased with how it's come out. It's nowhere near as heavy as it was previously. You can still see the livery underneath, but it looks dirty enough to be in service. This has been copied from pictures of the real locomotive and using other 56s as inspiration. Here's the other side, same sort of deal. Just done a bit of streaking with some weathering powder, then gone over it with some matte varnish to protect it. Still drying at the moment. I did some weathering powder up on here by the exhausts, also at this end. A few bits just there. Got a few other bits there as well. Just makes it look a bit better. But once that's dry, I can just put all the bits back in it, and that's ready to go back onto the layout. Okay, I've given it a coat of matte varnish. It's taken the shine off it and removed any of the marks that the gloss was showing through, so things like old transfers and things just slightly showing up. When you strip off old transfers, you are going to get outlines and things that show through unless you actually start to sand the plastic of the model. But the matte varnish hides anything that was slightly visible in the gloss varnish, so you remember you could just about see the old double arrow underneath the new one. Well, now we put some varnish on, you can't see that anymore. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to give it a weathering. Studied pictures of this particular Loco in this colour, and the roof was reasonably dirty, although not as dirty as I thought it might have got. And there was a smattering of sleeper grime along the side, but it wasn't that dirty. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get some masking tape. I'm going to mask off all of the yellow and the blue so only the roof is visible. I'm just going to go round it with masking tape so that only the roof is visible. I'll then dull the roof down with some roof grey and some roof dirt, and that will give me the effect I'm looking for without putting a load of dirt and grime onto the side. I want to weather the sides separately and in keeping with the pictures of the real thing. I've got a couple of pictures I've been using, so if we bring this up, that's the real thing, and there's the model. And you can see it didn't get that dirty. The roof is, but the rest of it isn't that bad. You get a bit of sleeper grime along the sides, but it was mainly the roof and the underframe. So here they are, both finished. This has taken me about 3-4 weeks to do. It's been quite a bit of effort, but definitely worth the effort. I've got 56049 back looking presentable. It's nicely weathered, it's not overdone, and more importantly, I've got the right shade of rail freight rate along the bottom, and that's made a massive difference to the appearance of that Loco. Really pleased with how that's come out, and hopefully it'll be in service on the layout for many years to come. The repaint of 047 is now complete. Really happy with this as well. This was a lot of effort, but again, really impressed with how this has come out. It's made a huge difference. Since you last saw it, I added a few more details. I painted the grills up here black, as per the prototype. I painted the horn grills correctly at either end, and I've just glued everything back together and added all of the detail. I've given it a light weathering along the bottom. That blends in nicely with the grime along the underframe, and I think it looks pretty close to the pictures that I found of this particular machine. The roof vents I made don't look too bad. You can tell that they're different, but from normal viewing distance I think it looks fine. It's a lot better than it was previously. Although it looked fine, I would have known that those roof vents were wrong for the layout, and it would have bugged me every time I ran the train. So that's made a big difference for me. And of course the change from rail freight to BR large logo. I really do like this livery, and this is now my second locomotive in this colour scheme. I've got a Bachmann 47 here. This is 47535, University of Leicester. This is pretty much as the model comes out of the box, although I did weather it. And it matches pretty well with the 56. The two of them look really good together. There's a closer look at the black buffer beam, all of the accessories added on the front. Had to be really careful, obviously, putting all the detail back together, particularly the glazing. Very easy to scratch or damage the model during that process. Fortunately, came through unscathed. Same is true for 049 over here. Putting all the glazing back in and getting the model back together is a very difficult process when it's freshly painted and you're worried about scratching it. They do mark easily when being handled on hard surfaces, such as when you're pressing down on the insides of them to put the glazing back in. So there we go, that's the project I've been working on over the last few weeks. It's taken a long time, and I've got some other locos downstairs as well that are being worked on, but I'm really impressed with how this has come out. This is a nice addition to the fleet, and you'll be seeing it on many freight workings in the coming months.